The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. Your info is in endless places that could expose you to identity theft, leading to lost funds. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Mom, Dad, I'm not throwing shade, but the whole New Year's resolution thing, kind of slipping, no offense. Anyway, my best friend Jenny's dad, crushing it. He uses Blue Apron. He says he ordered one-pan assemble and bake meals and these things called meal kits. They're all super easy to make. He keeps yelling, protein and fiber, baby. Also, the food, we tried it. So good. So maybe you check it out or whatever. Blue Apron. Get $50 off your first 2 orders plus free shipping with code STIR50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Welcome to No Question About That. This is United Inc., our finance show. I'm Ed with Jamie today. How's it going, Jamie?
Yeah, I'm good. Probably still riding a caffeine rush after the last few days of the transfer market, but
Wow.
Can't complain. I'm not, and I won't complain about lack of sleep when there's likes of Ornstein, Florian Plettenberg, Romano, et al.
Romano probably just gets paid to tweet. He schedules them, so yeah, not getting him in there. You know, he's relegated himself down to the championship level of journalists, I think. So
yeah,
some people might say. Definitely not me. A lot of slandering him.
A lot of people saying it.
Yeah. All right. Well, this one we can do a transfer market recap, break down the numbers on how exactly United were able to spend this summer, 148 million net. In fact, it's not even really that, actually, because Hojlund's basically guaranteed. And then we'll go around the houses on some of the other Premier League clubs and what they've spent. I mean, headline number from the Premier League's point of view was 3 billion spent in this transfer window, which is quite a lot of money. More than 2 billion more than the next biggest spenders league-wise, which was Serie A. La Liga has dropped down to the bottom of the big five in terms of spending. That's what cost controls do for you. 3 billion spent by the Premier League, also about 3 billion in transfer debt between them. There's just an insane amount of money that people are buying everything on the tick these days, which is fine as long as your revenue is guaranteed, which appears to be with the Premier League. You could definitely say we are post-COVID now, though, in terms of transfer spending. The gloves have come off somewhat. Well, all right, how should we do this? We'll talk about United ins and outs, and then we'll go through some of the rivals. So the headline is 216 million spent. That's total. If you included all bonuses, 68 recouped. That is not including bonuses. And 148 net. That doesn't include Rasmus Hojlund, who we'll talk about in a little while. A little bit of a complicated deal structure there. Complicated-ish. That worked out. I mean, let's talk about some of them. Alejandro Garnacho. I guess this one ran on all summer. Chelsea's model is to lowball. That's what they did. They tried to leverage their position, which was a position of strength. Garnacho has made it known since January. This is a one-club market. United bombed him out. I'm not sure that was entirely sensible. We've sold him for 35 plus 5 in achievable bonuses. And that is 40 clear onto the P&L this year, because obviously his book value was 0.
Yeah, I think, look, we can keep this one pretty straightforward. Like, look, the clear that, there was a benchmark in the market of around 50 for, players of Garnacho's position. You could argue his market value is higher given his performance and age. Look, I think it was one of those where, and we'll get onto this with other departures as well, but I think United we're always going to have to take a pragmatic approach here, which was, it is known for whatever reason that we are sellers in the market, whether it's financial constraints, whether it's also there are just some players that we have deemed surplus to requirements. That was always going to inhibit the ability to generate massive sums from these departures. Look, I think Garnacho, 40 million a straight profit, a few million on top as well with wages. Not a groundbreaking deal, but you've arguably removed one of the headaches from the squad. And there is probably a value to that. Is it, enough to make up the difference? Probably not.
Is it 10 to 15 million pounds of market value? Yeah, who knows? I mean, obviously on the other side of the ledger, this means that United have 10 to 15 million less than they might have had otherwise. But I think you're right. They've been very pragmatic here. They boxed themselves into a bit of a corner. It was clearly a decision everyone was comfortable with. I'm sure they knew the consequences of that. Garnacho's people didn't exactly make it easy, and he's played with some baggage, although I think it's probably more in the minds of Manchester United fans than necessarily the executives at the club in terms of Garnacho. And we'll see in the years to come whether we regret this. But, Eghbali's been on, one of Chelsea's investors, has been on the record saying their model is to buy and then sell. So he'll get flipped inside 2 years, I'd imagine. That's what they're doing with all their players. Incredible amount of transfer activity there. Although, brief sojourn into Chelsea, because they do have some restrictions, of course, that UEFA have placed on them about their net spend on List A, I think it is. And so they've had to be quite creative in terms of their selling as well. When I say creative, I mean completely and totally corrupt by selling Ben Chilwell to Strasbourg, which is their own team. But they've had to do that as well. I mean, quick note on Chelsea. Where are they in terms of their finances?
Yeah, so I think, look, I've done a piece on this. The real thing that they've submitted they got fined by UEFA, one of the heftiest fines that UEFA have ever given for breaching the UEFA PSR rules. They've actually had a 4-year plan put into place. Normally it's 2 or 3 years, but because of the extent of the issues at Chelsea, they've done a 4-year process. The key thing, or two things, is they have a business plan that they've submitted to UEFA, which they need for next year. So they need to hit those numbers to avoid a further fine. The big one, though, is in 2 years' time, they need to be at a position where their football losses are not more than 5 million euros. So roughly speaking, £4 million. UEFA don't allow things like asset sales, selling your hotels, your car parks, your women's team, etc., etc. So they are going to have to get their house in order over the next couple of years. It's going to put a pressure on them to sell, and you've seen that this year, and that's been exacerbated by this List A condition, which is basically when you compete in a UEFA competition, you've got a list of players that you need to submit to say they can play in the competition. That has an associated wage and amortization cost. Chelsea need to be in a position where going into this season's competition, the annualized cost of their squad list can't be any higher than what they submitted last time. Yeah. So that's why you've seen a race to sell the likes of Nkunku, Jackson, because they had, I think roughly, if I remember correctly, something like a 40 to 50 million impact on that budget. So pretty meaningful.
Good job that a Saudi club came in and paid a ridiculous amount of money for João Felix, wasn't it? Who could have thunk one was coming? All right. So
yeah, I could get really nerdy and say that João Felix's sale didn't actually qualify for the List A, but it does for their overall football earnings rule.
It qualifies for the Ed school of that was totally corrupt and dodgy. Rasmus Hojlund. Interesting deal structure, this one, because United will get 50 million euros in the end for Rasmus, 44 million pounds. It's actually going to turn into a slight profit on book value, which is amazing, really, given there's been quite a lot of value destruction here. It's a 6 million loan fee and a 44 million euro conditional obligation. We're having to come up with new phrases every single year now. For if the moon is in alignment with Mercury on a Tuesday night, then the deal gets done. But it appears to be contingent on the fact that Napoli will qualify for the Champions League. One would have thought, they got Conte, they're Italian champions, their finances are all right, I think. One would imagine they will qualify barring some kind of disaster, and that Rasmus will become a Napoli player, and permanently that is. And he apparently pushed for this obligation, wanting to believe that his future was clear and not being one of these journeyman players who gets loaned out for 4 years in a row, like a number of the Chelsea squad, I should note. There's a few of them in that position. So, in the end, this has worked out all right for United. If we had to sell, which I guess the finances basically dictated, this is, we got par for the course on this deal.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good deal. This year, there is going to be around about £10 million benefit from the loan fee and the wages, which doesn't, it's not far off covering the amortization cost. So you're kind of breaking even for this year. Then you'll be able to kind of get some cash and some profit next summer, assuming that they do qualify, as you say, for the Champions League. All in all, I think that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, and I presume it'll actually be executed in the same financial year anyway. So
yeah, I need to brush up, but there is a rule which I believe is, if it is truly an obligation, then it gets booked in the same accounting year. A conditional obligation doesn't strike me as an obligation, so it might get kind of moved over into next year's accounts, depending on when Napoli qualify, all that sort of good stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. Marcus Rashford, done earlier in the deal. This is a loan with an option at €30 million, £26 million. But United saved big on the wages, which, a non-Champions League year, so you can reduce them anyway. And he's taken a bit of a haircut on his own wages, but also save on the tax. So it's a 15 to 17 million pound saving in this financial year, which is, given that he has zero book value, is quite a significant saving. Actually, if you do all the numbers up, United are saving over £60 million a year on wages anyway, with sales and loans. Obviously, they've added a bit on the other side of the ledger with the incomings, but Marcus is a big factor in booking this profit here. Fewer costs.
Yeah, I think, both Rashford and Sancho deals, I think are pretty good. I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure how they've managed to get the Sancho deal over the line. I think that has gone pretty under the radar. 80% of wages covered for the whole year. And, it sounds like there is either a loan fee or bonuses, which for all intents and purposes, people seem to be thinking that's the whole of the wages are going to be covered. So, if you're thinking about overall P&L impact, you're going to be saving year over year, probably 12 million, 13 million pounds.
On Sancho, yeah.
On Sancho. Altogether, when you factor in all of these loans that have gone out the door, the player sales, the sell-ons, the add-ons, etc., I actually think United's P&L is going to be 40-ish million pounds better off. Mm-hmm. I think that is some, obviously that's equivalent to effectively the Garnacho sale, but yeah, I think that's pretty good going, all in all.
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely. That's when you balance all the incomings as well. Yeah, Sancho, there is an amortization cost. It seems like they've executed the 1 year additional, the 1 year option on his contract. That hasn't actually been confirmed by the club, but it was widely reported. That splits the amortization cost in two, basically. Half of it this year, half of it next year. And if United sell Sancho for, £5 million next year, will actually be ahead on the deal, that kind of thing. Or, Actually, you wouldn't even need to do that to just cover his wages, and you're pretty much ahead on it. But
yeah, I mean,
it's not bad in the. I was kind of thinking after he turned down all those moves that we'd be in a situation where we were loaning, but to get so much of the wage covered. I'm not sure why he wants to stay in the Premier League, honestly. It's not the league for him.
I haven't seen anything official about the triggering of the option.
Yeah, it's not been confirmed. Yeah.
There is a part of me which actually I hope they haven't. And I actually think it would go against a little bit what we've seen in the market in terms of how United have operated.
Right,
it's kind
they'd
of
rather
like
just get the wages off the books permanently. Yeah. It is a little odd that it's a loan with only 1 year left. Normally you'd protect your asset value, but of course, if United are like, we want a clean break, this is it, done, that would make... Because committing to another year of wages is obviously committing to a big risk if Sancho is in poor form, gets injured, whatever.
Exactly. Like, currently, I mean, like, in either scenario, you're committing yourself to whatever it is, 16, 17 million pounds of amortization costs, whether it's split over 1 year, 2 years, doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
By triggering the option, though, you are opening yourselves up to another 15 million in wages. Actually, if you've got all the wages covered this year on a cash basis, like if you've got his wages covered this year, you're kind of done with it.
Yep. All right, Antony deal. I mean, in the end, United will make a loss on this one, at least now, and then... So it's 26 million. It's 21 million. So United actually did come down a couple of million. They split the difference on that 6 million euros that he was owed. Betis refused to pay. We've come down a bit on the fee. They've paid the other half of it. That's normally how you do these deals. I don't know why they were being such dicks about it, but there you go. They thought they could big dog United. I mean, come on. Anyway, about 21 million as a fee. Massive amount of amortization cleared off the books, obviously, because of his massive transfer fee coming in. His wages weren't particularly big. What are they, 5 million a year, something like that, a little over that.
Yeah.
And a 50% of total value of any future sale, which is a great deal. If he's only 25. If he has another good season at Betis, the temptation will be to sell him, of course, because it's Betis. They sell, generally. And so in the end, it should work out for United. I mean, even if he doesn't go for a massive fee over this 21 million, then United will come out just about ahead. But a small loss this year, a few million loss.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of add to that, the mechanics of what happened from last Friday till Monday, as you mentioned, United did cede a little bit on the price, but I think in return they did get that sell-on clause changed from profit, so 50% of profit, to 50% of total transfer value in the future. So there was a little bit of, quid pro quo in that negotiation. Again, they've removed a headache, right?
Yeah. It's contextual, isn't it? I mean, if you were saying, like, based on his performances last season for Betis, which were pretty good, 20 million quid doesn't seem enough. Not when Nottingham Forest reserve goalkeeper goes for that much to Newcastle, right? Still one of the dodgiest deals ever done. So it doesn't feel like a big fee, but it's removed a massive headache. I mean, he was costing United 16 million on the amortization a year anyway, and obviously not contributing anything on the other side of it. So it's taken a lot of wages, some wages, and a lot of amortization off the PSR. It's brought some money in. Net, we should be all right. The 50, I do wonder, same with Greenwood, really, the 50% sell on, 50% of total deal. It's almost a disincentive to sell, right? So Betis would have to get such an extraordinary fee to feel like they were getting anything out of this. So I wonder whether it's actually helpful having that big a sell on.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe it's the only way that United would do the deal.
Yeah, and look, I personally don't ascribe much value to many of these sell-ons. Look, we've been the beneficiary of a number of them this summer. Yeah. But as you say, when you take into account his age, in order to fetch a meaningful fee, he's going to have to, at the very least, carry on like he has been doing. If not, do slightly better for a bigger club to take him on for even, say, 30 million.
Very true. All right. And that's it on the sales. I mean, obviously, Ericsson, Lindelof and Evans all left as well. Ericsson's wages are near enough 8 million, Lindelof 6 and Evans 3. That's a lot that's come off the wage bill there. 17 million pounds worth of wages every season that have come off. That has given United headroom to go and spend elsewhere. I'm assuming that Johnny Evans' loan manager contract is not that hefty. He might be on normie wages now. That'll be hard for him, won't it? Having to come down to normie wages. On the incomings, so Sesko, Cunha, and Buemo, Lamans, and Diego Leon. It's adding about 70 million, I think, about 70 million a year in costs, both on wages and amortization. You'll probably have even more accurate numbers than me. That's what I back of the envelope did.
Yeah, I've got it closer to 85.
Right. Okay.
When you put in all the fees, closer to 85.
Oh, actually, it's true. I've done this without adding the add-ons, which it's very weird. I guess you should assume they don't actually get booked into the P&L until they become probable, right? So until it actually looks like you're going to execute them. So if there are things like qualifying for the Champions League, number of appearances, they're different kind of things. But yes. Yeah. Over 80 if you include all the add-ons, about 70 if you don't. I mean, it's of course, a big annual spend, but United have more than made that back up in the sales anyway. So it's come out as a pretty tight window. I mean, I don't know whether you want to comment on Laurie Whitwell's piece in which he talks about Project 90, which is to find 90 million of additional, I don't know what you'd call it, margin per year, either on cost savings or additional revenue. I mean, it actually seems pretty achievable. I'm not sure about on the cost savings piece, but on the revenue, given that United aren't getting any European broadcast rights, that should be quite achievable once you get back into Europe.
Yeah,
that's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, look, I mean, you know, Ed, and I'm sure many of our listeners do, I've been kind of banging the drum about cash flow, liquidity, etc. for a number of years now. And, to go deep financial nerd mode, there's something called the current ratio, which effectively measures how can you serve the kind of near-term liabilities that you got, the payments that you need to make. United's ratio is about a quarter, so they have, for every pound of liability that they need to pay out over the next year, they have about 25p, is where they were at the end of the last financial period, fiscal year. That's like multi-decade lows. And so they need to consistently improve the balance sheet to be able to be kind of self-sufficient, live within their own means. Because at the moment, it's basically all being funded by this credit facility. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely financially something that they should be looking to do. I actually, like yourself, don't see 90 million as that much of a stretch target. When you factor in, on a multi-year basis, when you factor in, United should be sustainably higher in the league. Say on average 5th for the next 3 years, cautiously, you would hope. That's about a 35 million uplift in revenue alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You then get the European competition on top, so you could do it from that alone. Mm-hmm. I'm actually surprised it's not a bit higher, but I think it's also pragmatism. It's going to take a number of years to fix all of this. So I think it's absolutely what they need to do. It's reassuring to see that they've got this in place. I actually also think with a target being that low, I might be reading too much into this, but it almost incentivizes you to not take short-term decisions. Mm. If you've got a stretch target of like 150 million pounds per year, actually selling someone like a Kobbie Mainoo, mm-hmm. all of a sudden becomes way higher up on the priority list in order to be able to achieve that target. Setting something as low as 90 should be pretty achievable on its own, and incentivizes you, I think, as operations to run things for the long term, which, as a fan, music to my ears.
Well, absolutely, and United have not really been thinking like that for quite a number of years now. I mean, especially with the commercial upside on particular deals that looked a little odd in any particular window. This one looks both financially sustainable in terms of our spending this year, but also like coherent with any kind of long-term squad building. So if Amorim doesn't work out, and I think it's fair to say there are quite a lot of question marks on him at the moment from a football perspective, you can imagine any of these players would fit under pretty much any modern coach and system. Although his team requires a lot of specialists, they've not actually bought specialists. They didn't go off and buy a couple of wing backs. I mean, obviously Patrick Dorgu came in the winter. That's really the only one, and he has played most of his football at fullback anyway, right? So that's a football question, not a finance one, but they've been sensible with how they're spending their money on these longer term assets as well, right? And I think they kind of have to do that. That's the whole point of having a director of football in place, is to think fairly long term about squad building. You take your budget you've got and you go off and use it sensibly rather than spunking it on some 30-year-old from Real Madrid. Wouldn't want to do that again, would we?
Or
and in that sense,
Ajax.
Oh yeah, Jesus, yeah, no more IH purchases, please. Yeah, I mean, it's actually. I mean, I was thinking about this when I was writing my Substack last night. It's. I mean, United have bought more players in a single window. They might even have spent more. I'm sure they have than 200 million in a single window before. It has really felt this coherent. Now, of course, they might not all work, right? I mean, I would suggest with Premier League ready Cunha and Mbeumo, you pretty much know what you're getting. Will they get 20 goals a season? Who knows? But it's going to be enough. And then Benjamin Sesko, a bit more of a risk, obviously. There might be an adjustment period. But, is he going to be worse than Rasmus Hojlund? No. He's not more expensive than Rasmus Hojlund in terms of his annual cost either. And Diego Leon is a throwaway because he's so cheap. And Lamon's a bit of a risk on a footballing side of things, but again, split over 5 years, not particularly large annual cost. And the financial risk there is that we've got 3 senior goalkeepers on the books. 3 into 1 doesn't go. Someone will have to get sold for sure, right? And there's still the Turkish and Saudi windows open, so something could happen there. Wouldn't be a surprise at all. I think the message has been given to Andre Onana that he might want to find a new club.
And yeah, I think he changed agents, if not earlier this year, then maybe last year. So it sounds like the message would have been given to him, because typically you only change your agent if you're looking to move. But yeah,
a little bit of colour in that same Laurie Whitwell piece, sorry.
No, go.
Which was amazing. Andre Onana turns up for pre-season training, having dropped a bollock all the second half of last season, demands a new contract. And apparently the suspicion is, according to the piece, that he might not have been in fully perfect condition either, because he turns up with an injury and it pulls his hammy on day 2 of training. Dodgy, Andre, dodgy. I mean, come on, asking for a new contract. Deary me. He'd have got it under Woodward as well.
Yeah. Thankfully, they did not cede to that. As common sense prevailed. But yeah, look, it's not sexy, and probably doesn't appeal to, some of the audience that you might find on parts of social media. But this continues the trend that we saw last summer, right? There was no question about it, no pun intended, that United had too many players for their first team squad. They had so many players on the books. And last year, if I remember correctly, they brought in 5 and sold, I think it was 12 or 13 players. This summer, you brought in 4. 3 have gone from expiring...
5 if you count Diego
5
Leon,
with Diego Leon, sorry, yeah. You've removed 3 in the expired contracts. You've also sold Garnacho and Antony. 3 more on loan.
Yeah.
So they're continuing to trim the squad, get the cost base in a sustainable shape, and you've now, they clearly, whether you agree with it or not, they prioritised the front line. Last summer it was the defence. No prizes for guessing what's going to be the next focus. And it's all sensible stuff in my eyes.
Yeah, you can definitely make a football argument for prioritising midfield more than they have done. I mean, I think this is bending the squad to Amorim's will as well as the financial will, right? He has prioritised the front line. He didn't trust what Garnacho, Rashford, Antony, Sancho, Hojlund were giving him. And he wanted a new front line. It also fits the game model and what we saw in the last few games, which is slightly more direct. They're going to make do and mend on midfield. It could blow up in our faces. That one, Bruno gets injured. And there is a capital F on the fucked, basically, from a playing point of view. The decision they've made that I guess they could have hobbled on with Hojlund and not bought Sesko, and it would have, I mean, on the finances, not made that much of a difference, honestly, given how the deal's structured. But we'll see. I mean, if it's desperate in January, there is room to spend more, and they could do that if they really need a midfielder by January. If we're looking like we really need to prop up that, and it would make, I mean, if we're down in 10th, Amorim won't be in a job anyway. But if we're 6th and chasing a European place, then they have room to spend if they want to.
Well, look, I think that's the point, right? Like, this is where, you have to marry the business side of things with the football side of things. Amorim will be under pressure to deliver this season, right? And by the fact that they haven't bought a midfielder, and as we mentioned earlier, they've not gone all in on wing-backs. They've given Dorgu, but we're still somewhat making do with that. Like, if you're thinking it from, Jason Wilcock's perspective, right, how are we managing our risk from a footballing perspective? Well, they actually haven't, they've given Amorim a lot of what he needs to get a better result on the pitch. They've not given him everything. And so, look, there'll be a politics at play in terms of, depending on what happens on the pitch. But actually also, we're now not overly levered to this system, this game model. There is some flexibility in it. And so if we do need to pivot, and if they want to pivot, they do have that option. So again,
yeah,
sounds boring, but it's pretty sensible.
One note on Mainoo, didn't get the loan he'd apparently asked for away. Not surprised, really, given that there are only 4 central midfielders in the squad. One of them ancient, one of them's crap, one of them's Cobby, and one of them's Bruno, who's not really number 8 anyway. But he's only got 2 years left on his contract. I'd watch that one if there's not a new contract signed, if he's still refusing based on either money or playing time or both, then next summer may be a fairly key point in that.
No, I don't think we've done a podcast actually since all of the Cobby news broke.
We have not, no.
But yeah, I completely. So look, I'm a fan at the end of the day, right? And I want to see players come through our academy, do well, and really uphold the traditions of what this club is all about. Dating back to the Busby days and prior to that. But at the same time, I think there is a pretty universal acceptance and consensus that actually we shouldn't be giving young players too much too soon, no matter who they are. And we're all, clearly there is a move to try and get a quote unquote better culture. And I think really what we mean by that is one where there is competition in an effort to make the team more successful. So I completely get, in a World Cup year, et cetera, where Cobby will be coming from saying, look, you're basically putting me behind someone who is never going to be moved from that position. Well, that view doesn't take into account, well, okay, what if people get injured, which has now ended up being the case. And I think also, if United had sanctioned him to go on loan, there's no guarantee that he would have signed a new contract anyway. He comes back from that loan, and he comes back from that loan with 1 year left on his contract. All of a sudden, United are in a position where actually they're on the back foot.
Absolutely, yeah. No, there was no world in which the United could have sanctioned this unless he signed a brand new 5-year contract and they saw it as some kind of development path. But they'd already loaned out Toby Collier; they were just too short. I think. I mean, if he misses out on the World Cup because he's not getting into Amorim's team, that's a football problem, not a finance problem. It might become a finance problem if he doesn't sign a contract, and United need to get something for the asset next summer. The asset, I mean, you've got to think, the player. You got to think about it like that. Yeah, caught myself being a dick there, but yeah, it's. I mean, but those are two different questions, and I agree that they're going to try and his first big contract. I mean, obviously he signed his first professional contract, but he's only on 20-something thousand a week. His first big contract should be in the Ahmad range, not in the Bruno range, and there's normally a compromise to be had. I think there's a bit of a perfect storm of he doesn't see a future under this manager with Bruno still at the club, and he would like a new contract, and so I would say all of those things factored in, not one more than the other necessarily, although the fact that he asked for a loan, not a sale, suggests that it's actually the playing side that is his priority now.
True. I would just say, look, if you want to be the starting midfielder for Manchester United, go and take the spot from one of the best players in the league, if not the world. Then you've earned your contract.
Well, you very much have done, yeah. I think there's other stuff at play there. But, yeah, all right, we'll move on and let's do a little bit of a round around the houses on other teams. I mean, I guess the headline here is Liverpool, who've spent £415 million on new players. Did a lot of selling as well, so they net out about 228. They can afford this because, well, one, their finances have gone past United's now, and also didn't spend anything basically last summer under Arne Slot. He took the very sensible view, maybe the view that Ten Hag should have taken, having a look at his squad, deciding if it was any good before blowing 85 million of your wad all over Antony. And he decided he'd like to make some changes. Obviously, they lost Trent Alexander-Arnold, but what they've really done is spend money in forward areas and upgraded their forward line to a fairly scary level.
I think this shows what is possible once you got your finances sorted and in a good spot. And look, I do have a lingering question mark as to, the liabilities that they've taken on in Wirtz and Isak. It's certainly a statement of intent, and they have certainly played their hand extremely well for most of this window. I think, they probably were a little bit too cute with Mark Gahey and Crystal Palace, given that deal ultimately fell through. But, they made a statement that they want to be seen amongst the super clubs, for want of a better phrase, alongside the likes of Real Madrid, Barcelona, once upon a time us as a destination. Look, I think, both Wirtz and Isak are going to need to prove their value. And it's a bit uncharacteristic for Liverpool to have taken on such big financial liabilities. It's probably also an indication of what they might have coming down the road on sponsorship deals. They've already signed a couple already, and I think there's at least one that I know of that is expected to be signed soon, not a game changer. Mm-hmm. But, that's probably giving them the confidence that they can afford to make these bets. But they've still got a lot of squad building to do probably over the next 2 or 3 years. Yes, okay, with Ekitike and Isak coming, they'll probably feel like they might have, Salah's goals covered once he departs. Centre-back is going to be a big issue for them when Van Dijk leaves. And there's still probably other areas in their defence and midfield that they need to plug. So it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves. But, they've had a good window. I think it's hard to say anything else.
Yeah, well, they're making a very strong bet to retain the Premier League. Hopefully there's an asteroid coming towards Earth at some point. Just love God. But also bet on the Champions League, and that is worth a huge amount of money now. I mean, winners of the Champions League will clear 150 million.
And so, get into the Club World Cup and potentially get another.
And get into the Club World Cup and get a bunch of free money every 4 years, or maybe every 2 years if Gianni Infantino's wet dream comes true. I guess the other big spenders here were Arsenal.
Yeah.
And it's interesting with Arsenal, of course, because they spent a lot of money and on a lot of attacking players, which is unusual for Mikel Arteta because, him with his tiny little tight trousers doesn't like playing attacking football, as we saw in their game against Liverpool at the weekend. 0.4 XG, I think it was, for Arsenal. But they haven't sold, and historically they actually don't sell very well, much like United. They don't have a good record. It's not like City and Chelsea, who have been selling well, or even Liverpool, who sold Ben Doak, who no one ever heard of, outside of youth team watching circles, and occasionally if you watch the Scottish national team. I mean, does anyone do that?
Of course, to watch McTominay.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Every chance to watch McSauce, you possibly can, yeah. So, Arsenal made a big bet here, not sold at all, which is interesting because they do probably, actually, if you look at their squad, it feels a little heavy, right? I know they will have a lot of games with the Champions League and all of that, but they've got 3 players in one position in something with Saka, Madueke, who's mostly played off the right, and Nwaneri. Like 3 into 1 doesn't go, right? So, and I know they had injuries and they're hedging against that, but it's a big commitment.
No, for sure. And I just published a Substack report on Arsenal today, kind of taking another, a deep dive similar to United into their finances. And I think, I think for the UEFA financial fair play rules, so football earnings and squad cost rule, they will be fine. I think football earnings, they will pass comfortably. The incremental revenue from their Champions League run last year, a few extra sponsorships on top, plus ticket price rises, should more than swallow kind of wage costs from their transfers last year. I think for the coming year, though, the squad cost rule, look, I don't think they're going to breach it. They've managed to move, the likes of Zinchenko off their books for this year to offset this, but they're going to be as close to the squad cost rule as they ever have been before.
Yeah.
And I think
historically not big spenders on wages, Arsenal, but that has changed.
Yeah, they clearly put some incentives in contracts for players a couple of years ago to qualify for the Champions League. Their wage bill exploded by 40% last year. So they now are kind of big spenders on wages. They're probably going to have, I think, somewhere in the region of 30 to 50 million pounds of headroom on squad cost rule. When you take into account the fees and the associated wages that they will need to pay to continue to upgrade their squad, that's not really a lot. That's like 2 or 3 players at the absolute maximum. So that if they don't win a trophy this year, they, like Andrea Berta, their new sporting director, he's known to be a great deal maker. That deal making ability is going to be kind of really put into question because you're going to have this situation, a little bit potentially like United are or have been, where you've got a number of high earners who still have a contract for a couple of years, have actually not been able to win all that much, but they're going to have to try and sell them on for reasonable fees to get that transfer profit line in their accounts to go up. So I think it's a bit of a pivotal moment. I don't think it's going to, unless their form completely capitulates, I don't think it will be the end of them by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think the risk that they've taken on is of that level, but it's probably going to light a fire under a couple of players here because if they don't perform, then the end is nigh for them, but also potentially damaging for Arsenal financially.
Right, yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about the new Champions League format is, of course, it's very, very hard to get knocked out. Just very hard. But where you rank in that table does matter for your round of 16 game, and the difference between round of 16 being knocked out and finalists or something like that. And, one would imagine they're looking at a deep run in the Champions League is 40 or 50 million pounds, right? So it's significant. One would imagine that it would have to be a disastrous season for them not to qualify for the Champions League again, though, right? So they have quite a lot of stability. I'm not sure when Saka's contract is up, but he'll be looking for an upgrade typically. All right, well, we mentioned Chelsea briefly earlier. They have actually come out as unbelievably for the deal makers as having negative net spend here, basically. Thank you, Saudi Pro League, for doing a ridiculous deal on João Felix, who hasn't been a footballer for 5 years. I'll stop going on about that one. But still, ridiculous. Check their LP contracts. That's what I demand. Like, exactly what's in there.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire wrong. So then I'm doing IT, and when I go to plug the servers in, they become sentient, and they won't let us access our network unless we forward their chain emails and memes to more and more and more people, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant finds and invites best-fit candidates to apply, so you can discover talent you may have missed. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
New Year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. So now get 2 snack wraps, plus fries, and a medium soft drink for just $8.
For limited time only, prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
They've sold Ben Chilwell to Strasbourg, of course, also owned by Clear Lake.
Exactly how much of Strasbourg's wage budget will Ben Chilwell be taking up? It's probably about a third of their wage budget, isn't it?
I think I calculated it as about a quarter. Strasbourg have also bought 3 Chelsea players on loan as well. I'm not sure how Strasbourg will be able to pass, UEFA's FFP test, so their stint in Europe may be short-lived. Yeah, there are some deals which, I'm eagerly anticipating the agent fee league table that comes out, I think soon. Post the summer window, because when you look at things like the Nicholas Jackson deal, I cannot fathom how they've managed. I mean, look, Bayern Munich have just changed their CFO. Maybe they've kind of managed to take a little bit of advantage of that. But some of the deals they've got through is incredible. I think I need to do the maths on it. I think on list day, it will be tight. There might be like 1 or 2 players that are like casualties, but it's going to be a close run thing. As we mentioned, the big test for them is going to be not this season, next season. Can they get down to 5 million loss? For that, they're going to have another round of great player trading, and they're going to have to sign a front of shirt sponsor because they still don't have one.
Yes,
and that's about
they still don't have one.
£60 million.
It is interesting, Chelsea's strategy on that one, because clearly they're looking for a very big number. They've done a couple of short-term deals, but they haven't signed up a long-term sponsor. I mean, when we say long-term on front of shirt, it's really only 3 years is the typical period anyway. But yeah, they clearly haven't hit the number that they want to there. They need to go and invent a new company, because had anyone heard of Infinite Athlete before or after they signed a deal with Chelsea? I think not. I think not. Yeah. Dodgy AF. Newcastle, big spenders, I guess, although obviously they were planning most of the summer to sell Isak once they'd hit the number they wanted, and/or found a striker that was willing to join them. In the end, they found 2 in Nick Woltemade, who's like 9 foot tall. Creative playmaker, 9 foot tall.
Taller than Sesko, right? I actually don't know.
He is. He's a big bastard. Yeah. And Wisa, who I think will be a good purchase for them. They did pay a lot of money for a 28-year-old, so...
Well, 29 now, I think, actually.
29. He's 28 until he's 29, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Brentford did well on their sales, although the risk for Brentford, of course, is they end up getting relegated because they've taken a few risks on their incomings. Where do we see Newcastle? They spent most of the summer complaining about PSR. Like, the irony. Fucking hell, Eddie Howe.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't PSR. Like, they didn't have...
Clearly not.
They didn't have a CEO or a sporting director. Now, look, the CEO, I will say, is in unbelievably unfortunate circumstances. But I think there has to be some questions asked about the leadership above that in terms of succession planning. Because, clearly there was very little of that with Dan Ashworth. And so I think they have suffered from having that vacuum of leadership at the top.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And look, okay, they've spent in my eyes, and look, we'll see, but it feels like they've overpaid massively for Voltemada and Visser. They paid £7 million less for Visser than we did for Mbumo.
Yeah. It's a bit mad.
It's a remarkable amount of money for Visser. And, there's no guarantees that those players are going to turn out to be even close to Isak in terms of output. And that is effectively the Isak money.
Mm-hmm.
So
it is, yeah. And I mean, I think the thing about when Paul Mitchell left, now the official line was a family illness, or he was ill. Can't remember now. One of the, maybe both. Who knows? I mean, I think behind the scenes, it's just fairly well recognised in football that Eddie Howe just does not work with sporting directors very well, right? He does not want it. He wants control, and so there's been political issues there as well. So they do need to get their house in order if they want to play with the big boys. They also chased the wrong players for a very long time. I think we can say that honestly. They were chasing Champions League players when, although they have Champions League football, that is not their status really, right? That's not how the football world sees them just yet, right? So build, and they claim it's PSR, and of course if there was no PSR, they'd be able to pay unlimited wages effectively, right? There's no cash flow problems at Newcastle. So walk before you can run, lads, I guess is the question. Who else in this list? Spurs spent an awful lot of the summer chasing players that they couldn't sign. Either the Eze deal was legitimately funny, I think, for Bants and stuff like that. They have done some good. They've done some good deal though. Xavi Simons is going to be a very good player for them, I'm sure. Yeah,
Kudus as well. Good Premier League proven player.
Very good players. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how Kolo Muani gets on up front for them.
Yeah, he's wandered around a little bit. Kolo Muani was never. What was it? Paris Saint-Germain paid about 80 million for him. He hasn't lived up to that. 145 million net spend for Spurs, which is, I mean, they can afford it, right? I mean, they will be in the Champions League this year. They have that big shiny new stadium, not that new anymore. Their finances have typically been in a very healthy state. They've not done a lot of great deals, though. I mean, what they've spent their money on over the last few years doesn't look very good.
Yeah, I think they're in this a little bit like Newcastle, but a bit further on. They're in this like tricky middle ground where they've got the finances to pay big fees for players and probably not quite the wages. So it allows them, I think, to pick up the best of the talent kind of below, the big players in Europe. But they're not yet able to kind of pick those people that will probably keep them always in the Champions League spots. And it's almost, I think a little bit, they've got this like hamster wheel where they're just always chasing their tail to be in and around it without really having the squad to sustainably stay there. And, because they're not paying massive wages, they can probably always move people on and at least break even on a lot of players. Mm-hmm. So, it's one of those where I can understand from a business perspective why you don't necessarily kind of, for want of a better phrase, break the bank for one of those like marquee players. But they could just be kind of like stuck in this position for a little bit of time. Yeah.
And quick word on a few of the others. City spent about 100 million net this summer. They had obviously spent quite a bit in the winter as well. So put that in context. And they knew they were getting free Club World Cup money. As it turns out, that'll probably cover their net spend this summer. I can't remember what they spent in the winter, but at least 75 million on Marmouche, a few others as well. So
Kushmanov as well, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. A couple of younger players. Yeah. I mean, I wonder whether we're seeing the slow decline of Pep, or will he surprise us again this season with the squad they've got? Because it does look a lot of talent, but they are moving on from. Obviously, Kevin De Bruyne, Edison has gone. The Donnarumma deal looks weird to me. I'm surprised they did that deal, given Pep's preference for ball-playing goalkeeper and massive, massive wages. Apparently, he was asking 13 million netto pounds. He would have been United's top earner if we'd done that deal. So it's interesting where they've spent the money. And whether it's the right strategy.
Well, look, they've got a lot of chips to play with when it comes to UEFA FSR rules. So, like, their spend doesn't necessarily concern me all that much. I do think, from like a footballing direction, it feels like there are potentially winds changing here, and I do wonder whether also, signing Donnarumma was potentially a recognition that they needed maybe a little bit more leadership, a bit more experienced hands. Like, he might not be the perfect footballing solution, but he might bring a bit of other stuff to the squad. Mm-hmm. They bought a lot of young players who very, very talented, but actually haven't won all that much. And as a lot of people in football know, like, getting over the line and actually winning is a different story. And sometimes you actually do need a few players who've been there and done it to just kind of, help everyone along.
The Premier League will be hyper competitive on a footballing point of view this year. Liverpool, Arsenal, City, you could make a case for any one of them winning the league this year. And below them, Chelsea, Newcastle, Villa, Spurs, United. Pick your poison. Who's chasing? I mean, it's a bit optimistic from United's point of view that we might be chasing that second block, but you never know. I mean, I think you can obviously say that Villa... Yeah, absolutely. You can obviously say that Villa or Newcastle's squad is particularly better than United's now. There's obviously a kind of footballing execution piece to this as well.
Yeah.
United actually haven't done very well under Amorim, but I mean, there's the top three, you can call it that, in terms of squad quality, and then there is the rest.
Yeah,
and even while we're going around the finances of them, the three new teams that have come up, I mean, Leeds have spent 90 odd million net. Sunderland has spent even more than that. Burnley not quite that much, but I mean, Burnley have been buying half the Chelsea cast-offs. So it is very, very competitive. The biggest winners of the window from a financial point of view in terms of net spend are Bournemouth, who sold all of their players. And that might be quite risky. And then Brighton, who like always run at a profit, basically, because they know that they can pluck out some Paraguayan third division player and he'll be the next £100 million Carlos Baleba replacement.
Or Chelsea recruit.
Or a Chelsea recruit, yeah. Yes, the strangest... Two really very strange deals here. Julio Enciso, I think he's Paraguayan, actually, going to Strasbourg on loan, but with a pathway to becoming a Chelsea player. And Buonanotte, who was about to head off to Leicester on loan and has now gone on a straight loan to Chelsea. Explain that one. Makes no sense.
Oh, I mean, yeah, on the surface, it doesn't. So on Enciso, it is interesting how the reporting of that deal has slightly changed. So at first it was all Blueco, so the company that owns both Chelsea and Strasbourg, they were signing him. And it now seems to be that no, it is actually Strasbourg that have signed him. But it has to be one. His registration has to sit with one club, right? Can't sit with a third party. Exactly. And then I think it's a question of, well, okay, how does Strasbourg finance that? So I think when it was put out there that it would be Blueco potentially being involved, I had to delve deep into the archives to understand, is that even possible? Because there are rules preventing third-party ownership. If there is no economic benefit to a third party, then there is means for a transfer to happen through a third party. So what that really, in practical terms, means, as long as Blueco don't make a profit from moving this player between two clubs, then it's fine. And there is I won't go into the details, but there is potentially a way to be able to do that, whereby Strasbourg loan money to Blueco. But I think it's another example of how Chelsea, Blueco are really pushing the boundaries and are really testing, I think, the strength of UEFA's financial fair play rules.
Absolutely. And rules generally on related parties. By the way, United now can do deals with Nice again. We had an 18-month ban. You wouldn't believe it, given the amount of traffic between Strasbourg and Chelsea that UEFA had any rules in this place. But yeah, I don't know whether Sir Jim had any plans to really execute a multi-club ownership system of... there was talk about Todibo coming, of course. Sir Jim actually did opine on that one before UEFA said no. Whether there would be any more traffic, I don't know. But given that the rumours are still there that he's trying to sell the club,
yeah,
who knows?
I'd be surprised. I mean, there has been, I think, some loans of young players to Lausanne. So yes. I think maybe that's how it potentially could work. But as you say, he's put Nice on the market. And so I'd be surprised if there's a whole raft of movement between the two clubs.
All right, very good. Well, let's race around the houses on the rest of the Premier League rivals. A decent window for United, both from a financial perspective and a playing perspective. Now up to Ruben Amorim to actually deliver us some bloody results. Please, Ruben.
Let's hope so. More wins. More wins like Burnley, maybe. Just concede fewer goals.
Yeah. And put an appeal on our absolutely outrageous ejection from the EFL Cup by a team that was cheating with a player that hadn't been registered. Disgusting. So, look into it. Conspiracy theories will abound with that one. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Catch us on patreon.com/NQATpod if you want to check out our bonus pods. You can catch Jamie at Subprime Goals on all the socials. He has a different handle on each one. I don't know why.
I know. I do need to change that.
You need to sort that one out. Yeah. Brand Jamie is being diluted here. Catch me at NQATpod everywhere. Same handle. See how that works? It's amazing. Yeah.
I'll take note.
If you're watching this, you can catch us on the apps, podcast apps, and if you're listening, you can look at our lovely faces on YouTube. I think that's it. Thank you very much, Jamie. Check out Jamie's Substack as well. Always very good. And he is diving into stuff that is well beyond United as well. You're up there with Kieran Maguire and Swiss Ramble, challenging them. The up-and-comer. Be complaining about PSL rules on Substacks.
I don't think I'm quite there yet, but it's very nice of you to say that I might be.
All right. Very nice. Bye now.